Hello and a very warm welcome to this week's episode of Out and About in the UK. Coming up a little later in the show, we'll be in Woolwich for a charity concert organised by singer-songwriter Don Mescall. We'll also be meeting Minister for the Diaspora Joe McHugh on one of his official engagements here in Britain. But first we're off to the Leighton Museum for the Seven Halts on the Somme exhibition, which represents 7 places of note during the battle fought by the Allies in World War I. We're here at the Leighton House Museum for your exhibition, which is inspired by the Battle of the Somme. Tell us about it.
Okay, well, I've been interested in the legacy of the 2 world wars for many years, and it's become a kind of motif or subject in my work. And it's about the idea of how we remember and how memory as such affects our sense of our identity. So I had an invitation from Eton College to look at their archive, something they were given by a former pupil that relates specifically to the First World War. And I went, and while I was looking at the archive, I was also working on paintings. And so these paintings that are in the exhibition, they grew out of that. And they're about the Battle of the Somme, about remembering the Battle of the Somme, but they're also about individual people who fought in that battle.
7 places is the theme and the title of the exhibition, so if you could talk us through that.
Absolutely. Well, these are 7 places where I've stopped, not exactly as a pilgrim, but places that have stopped me in my tracks in a way, and there are 7 places where lives were stopped of soldiers, and 7 places where the army was stopped. And so the paintings were conceived almost like a musical composition, really. I wasn't at the Battle of the Somme, obviously, and so to represent it in a kind of in a illustrational way would be meaningless. In a way, what the paintings represent, the motifs in the paintings, which are very abstracted, but they are related to the landscape. The soldiers would have been acutely aware of the landscape, and the landscape was an obstacle in many cases. So in each of the paintings, the motifs are from the landscape. The tunnel in the crater painting, the wood and Trones Wood, the sucrery, the sugar refinery, the windmill at Pozières. These were all things that the soldiers would have known intimately, and so the paintings freely relate to these. The photographs which we've included in this exhibition, I think, will help people to understand how the paintings developed, and that the paintings are really they're an imaginative construction, which memory has to be, and people often think about memory as being about the past, but it's actually in the present. We have to, if we remember, it's a creative activity that takes place in the here and now, and it's about an idea of some empathy and understanding for what this meant.
And people that come here to view the exhibition, what can they expect to see?
Well, first of all, they can expect to see colourful and expressive paintings. I didn't want the paintings to be dour and glum. They are meant to be uplifting in a sense. Their subject is not death and destruction, but the remembrance, in a sense, of sacrifices made 100 years ago and how those sacrifices still impinge upon our lives. There's very few people in Britain and Ireland who don't have some connection to the First World War, and very few who don't have some connection to the Battle of the Somme. Even since making these paintings, I discovered an uncle of my mother's who fought on the Battle of the Somme, didn't even know about him. So there's many, many, many connections. But the issue 100 years on is also about our connection with Europe. These young men didn't come back, and they're kind of they fought. The Battle of the Somme was about a battle for Europe, and it's a very poignant sort of moment.
So you obviously, with a name like O'Donoghue, there's an Irish background there.
Absolutely, yeah. The O'Donoghues, it's my father's side of the family. We're from County Kerry, from Barraduff. My grandfather left Ireland in 1911 and worked the railways in Manchester, but I was brought up within an Irish community in Manchester, and I have a strong sense of my Irish culture. My mother was Irish as well, and I live in Ireland as well as living in London, and I work in Ireland. So that's also a kind of 20th century legacy that my cultural roots are really in both countries.
So if anybody watching tonight wants to come along here to the Leighton House Museum in Kensington to take in this exhibition, how long is it running till?
Well, it's running to the early October, 2nd of October, and it is here in Leighton House Museum, which is Lord Leighton's house that he built in the end of the 19th century, so that he was the president of the Royal Academy at the time, very successful artist, and so the museum itself is an artist's house, but this room where the painting's in is a temporary or the gallery space for temporary exhibitions. So it runs through to October, and it's High Street, Kensington, so it's very accessible.
Well, a wonderful exhibition there at the Leighton Museum, and I really would recommend checking it out the next time you're here in London. Next, we're off to meet Minister of State for the Diaspora Joe McHugh on his recent engagement here in Britain. Minister, you're so welcome to London. It's your first engagement here as the Minister of State for the Diaspora in London. Minister for the Diaspora, it's quite a complicated role considering the amount of people, the Irish people all over the world.
Yeah, it is, and you could get bogged down in the definition of Irish. I remember working in a bar in Philadelphia one time, and this guy walks in and he says he was 17% Irish. So, you know, where do you start with the definition? There's a figure of 70 million people, but I think you have to look at the whole context of the work that's going on globally, and you take the traditional places, maybe London, you know, Birmingham, Manchester, and the traditional places in America as well. There's a lot of good work going on, there's a lot of capacity built up, and there's new centres looking to learn from them. And what I've found very interesting today, the people who's involved in supporting the Irish, obviously at the welfare end as well, and the vulnerable Irish, they're looking at an empowerment process now where they start developing a whole capacity building at a local level, rather than just relying on government funding coming from Dublin, where they actually try to create a new model, and I welcome that. I think it's the way forward. Taoiseach
Kenny has obviously over the last few weeks appointed you as in the new ministry. Your Donegal background, do you think that was did that play a part in it?
I don't know, and the Taoiseach does things when he gives people jobs. He gave me a job 2 years ago. I fell through the seat when he appointed me to the Minister for the Guilt Act, but he obviously had confidence in me that I could do what needed to be done, and he has given me a big job in terms of the diaspora. He's also given me the responsibility for international development. It's over €500 million fund for all the good work that's going on around the world in the conflict areas and places where there's massive need in terms of human displacement, and you know, how do I feel about being appointed Minister for the Diaspora? I feel very, very privileged and very, very honoured, and the temptation for me is to take my own experiences, having lived in the Middle East and having lived in London and America, and look at through that prism. But I know it's more complex. There's so many different needs.
Many issues within the Irish community, but I suppose the very, very big one is the whole issue of Irish vote abroad. What's the government's view on that right now?
The government's view is very, very clear. The Taoiseach has tasked me with the responsibility of driving the vote for the diaspora in presidential elections. And since been given this job a few weeks ago, I've already had engagement with Minister Simon Coveney, because his Department of Housing has responsibility for voting. And his officials and my officials have met. I'm meeting Simon Coveney again next week, and we are going to look at creating a momentum around this that hopefully will be in a position to produce a first report for government within the next 6 months. It's an ambitious target. It's not indicating what way this will develop or how it will work. We still will have to go to referendum, but it will be an opportunity to look at what will work, what's best, how do we facilitate people voting? Is it through the embassies? Is it through the internet? And who is entitled to a vote? So there's a lot of questions there to be asked. But I think it's important. This is not just a token vote. This is a very, very symbolic office. We can see the work that President Higgins has done with his trip here in 2014 to the United Kingdom, and as I was present in the Guildhall for his wonderful speech, and he was in Istanbul 2 weeks ago at the first World Humanitarian Conference, and the presidency, the office of presidency, has got legitimacy internationally. And wouldn't it just be great that if somebody living in Birmingham or living in Luton or living in Manchester or London or Brighton or Bournemouth, Irish people could have a vote in deciding who their president is?
I'm also I'm delighted to hear that the government are going to continue with the immigrant support programme. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, look, the immigrant support programme is working. Like, there's over 110 organisations we fund in the United Kingdom. The biggest percentage of funding goes just across the Irish Sea, upwards on 70% of overall funding. So there is a massive linkage there. And once again, we're looking to the groups themselves to come up with maybe a new model which will be more sustainable in terms of what their needs, their expectations is. Because one thing that politicians fall into a very, very dangerous trap. We sometimes estimate what's best for citizens, what's best for our electorate, or what's best for the Irish people abroad. The only way we can find out what's best for them is for them to come back with us to identify their needs.
Well, it was great meeting Minister McHugh there on his recent engagement here in Britain, and we'd like to thank him for taking the time out to speak to us. We're going to take a break right now, but do come back to us for the second half of the show. You're very welcome back to the show. Next, we're off to Woolwich for a charity concert organised by singer-songwriter Don Mescall to raise funds for local charities.
With an event like this, we plan about 6 months prior to the event, so it's quite a lot of preparation. It's a big production, it's a big stage, it's a big rig, food, beverages. It's a big deal. Our acts this year, wow! I don't think it's ever got bigger. Leo Green and the Experience. I mean, Leo. I've watched Leo perform with the likes of Van Morrison, Bob Dylan, Wet Wet Wet, Rod Stewart. The guy is a phenomenon, really. He is one of the best musicians that I know, and a hell of a nice guy.
It's funny because, travelling around Europe, you quite often get events that are put on by local councils or housing associations, but it's something we don't do very much over here. So when you come across an event like this, you want to wave the flag and shout about it. And I think the more the merrier, because, I'm sure there'll be people out there this evening who won't have seen a live band ever. There'll be people that do, there'll be people that haven't. And I think, to give people that opportunity is a great thing that Berkeley Homes have done. So to be applauded, and more of it, please.
This event is sponsored by Berkeley Homes, one of the bigger building companies here in the southeast and all over London, and they're a great bunch of people.
We want to put on more and more of these community events. It seems that there's a growing need for it, and people want to come down and enjoy these sort of experiences. So that's our aim now, is to carry on and get bigger and better, really.
Also, to have my friend Greg Sutton in from LA. Greg has written for the likes of Curtis Stigers, Carole King, has worked with Bob Dylan, has worked with the Rolling Stones.
I got involved through my buddy Don Mescall. I came over. We got in touch actually through Facebook. We knew he knew I was in town doing some gigs behind my new record, Deal With It, and so I came out to Pepper Pot Studios yesterday, and we wrote this brilliant song together called Passenger. Or Be My Passenger, we're not sure yet. But and Don asked me to come sing today, which I was only too happy to do.
And then, to top it all off, we had the Lewisham NHS Choir.
We're celebrating the local area and putting on a great show for everybody in the area.
I'm in a kind of a fortunate position where I do work with a lot of these people. Like Leo is due this year to come into my studio to work on his new album. The NHS Choir, I've been working with them already for their next album. pitching them some songs. Greg Sutton I've known, since I wrote with him 10 years ago in LA. I've been around a little bit. So a lot of the people that I invite down on behalf of Berkeley Homes to our events are people that I work with. Last year at Christmas we had Daniel O'Donnell. What an amazing entertainer that man, is. And it's been incredible. We had Mary Byrne last year from the X Factor. These are all people that I work with on a regular basis, and it's so wonderful to be able to reach out to these people. And when they come down, they really enjoy it. A lot of them don't want to go home.
We originally got started when we were contacted by a local production company called 2020 who were making a programme called Sing While You Work. That was made with them and Gareth Malone, and we made a short programme for BBC Two celebrating workplace choirs and putting them together.
Tell us about the members, because you all do have very busy lives outside of music.
We all work as part of a multidisciplinary team. We're involved in lots of different jobs in the hospital. Some of us are doctors, porters, A&E consultants, people who work in admin, finance, everything. So we're part of a massive team in the hospital, and we all just love singing together, really.
And what was it like getting to #1 in the British charts last Christmas?
Becoming #1 as a choir for us was just amazing. It's not something that we ever thought would happen to us. It was just so unbelievable. Everything happened so fast. We were stunned and over the moon, really.
What's been your biggest performance to date?
So our biggest performance to date was when we performed at the FA Cup final with Tiny Temper. It was just the most amazing thing, standing in front of 90,000 people. Very surreal, but absolutely amazing.
You've recently signed a major record deal. Tell us about that.
Following our #1 success, Decca contacted us and said that they'd really like to make a record with us. We were just so shocked and so excited to go and start that journey. It was absolutely amazing. And our album is out now on the 24th of June.
This is my first time in the Royal Arsenal, and Pepper Pot Studios. Well, of course, it's the man and the machine, but come in here and this has just got a fantastic vibe. You've got all the gear, beautiful guitars. It couldn't have been a more happy and happening day, creative day. And anybody who needs a good studio, who's cool, should come here and record, because this is the place, got the vibe.
You've written so many songs for so many big names, but I suppose your most well-known would be Stop, that Sam Brown had a hit with.
I'd been introduced to Sam by my publisher, and we wrote a song called Walking Back to Me, and we really dug each other. I thought she was a fantastic singer. So I was playing in this group, Lone Justice, and we were opening for U2 at the Sports Arena in LA, and Sam was in Los Angeles at the time. So we had a writing date, and it was like set for about 2 o'clock, and sound check was about 4 o'clock. So I walked in there, and she said, I got the start of this song here, and she played me the first verse of Stop. I said, yeah, that's pretty good, and we could do that, and we wrote it in about 20 minutes.
around the corner there's a little small venue called the O2, and I played there recently with Wet Wet Wet, and last year I managed to get up and do a couple of numbers with Van Morrison and Tom Jones, which was fun. So it's a great area. There's lots going on around here, not just obviously the O2. There's some great pubs, the Trafalgar Tavern, lots of music going on around here. So nice to be back,
Jerry Lee Lewis said about you that you were the greatest sax player that he ever worked with. That's a great endorsement of your art.
I should probably say I think I'm the only saxophone player he's ever worked with, because, no, it was a very nice thing he said. And he was one of those guys, every night the show was different. We had no set list. We didn't know what songs were coming in, what key or anything. So it was the most amazing kind of on-the-road university to go to. And I learnt more in those 2 years with him travelling around the world than I could have ever done at any college. So, again, very lucky. And I do look back now and think, did that really happen? Yeah. Amazing artist, a real icon.
You've played with some huge names, James Brown, Ray Charles, Bob Dylan, to name but a few. You must look back on those experiences with great fondness.
Regularly. I mean, I spent a lot of time with Van Morrison, and a lot of those people I played with when I was with Van. So people like Ray Charles would get up and sit in with him and we'd play. So there were moments when you'd find yourself thinking, it wasn't that long ago, I was in my bedrooms kind of playing along with these records, and suddenly I'm on stage with Jerry Lee or Van. So, I'm not the best saxophone player, but I'm definitely one of the luckiest,
I really feel that this particular site, this development, lends itself beautifully to live music. Here in Artillery Square, we've got the river bus, we've got the DLR train, we have the Crossrail coming in, we have this amazing building in the background, the Academy building. It's got great history, this. And we're changing history here, because this was a munitions factory, during the war times and all of that, and now we're bringing this beautiful soulful music to it.
It's been a great day for everyone, the whole community, to come down here and really show their support for local artists and people from all different artists from all around the country. So it's great really for everyone to come down. It's an honour for Berkeley Homes to host an event like this, really.
I've had people coming up to me this evening thanking me personally for the show, and that's a good feeling. That means that we got it right. A huge sense of community here in the Royal Arsenal in Woolwich. I looked out tonight from the stage and I noticed that the majority of people right here to the very end had their young children with them. Now, if we can create an event like that people feel safe to have their kids at, I know that we're doing the right thing.
But it really was great to meet so many talented musicians there on our recent visit to Woolwich, and we'd like to thank Don Mescall for inviting us along. If you'd like to contact the show, send an email to ian@irishtv.ie, and you can also find us on Facebook and on Twitter. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have right now, but do come back to us next week when we're out and about in the UK.